Welcome back to One Comic Book a Day, where we're covering Adventure Comics 138. Around the World in 80 Minutes. Man, that is cutting a lot of time out of that general journey. Also, not a particularly accurate title. This is actually a story that is at odds with itself. There are two separate stories, one a very generic Superman Superboy story, and the other one that has growth to it. And instead of these stories interacting the way they should or coming together in any way, they kind of take away from each other. So you have Superboy dealing with a bunch of counterfeiters across country. I don't know why it's counterfeiters again. Maybe counterfeit money was a big thing happening right there when they were writing that comic. It's not as head scratching as when Superman got really into like salvage. There were several issues of Superman where ships would get sunk so someone could claim the salvage on the ship, to a point that it felt like maybe there was a pandemic of this happening. I don't know, but it was a very specific thing that kept happening in Superman in a very specific time. Like almost every other story felt like that for a moment. It wasn't that many. It was maybe every 5 stories you would get some sort of salvage story. But we literally just had the whole thing with the plates to counterfeit in the last story. So having another counterfeiter operation involved in this one just feels a little too soon. Maybe someone in the Superman books was a little too worried about counterfeiting at the time. I don't know. The other story involves a man by the name of Matt Briggs. Matt Briggs does not like children. So Matt Briggs gets a job with the bus because there's some economic problem at this time, because it mentions a housing crisis and he's looking for a job and has to live with his sister and her husband with their bunch of kids, and he hates kids. But unfortunately, he has to drive the kids cross country. And you notice I keep saying cross country instead of around the world, because a bus driver is not going to drive you around the world. Notice the problem with the title. It does get to that title, but it is just a frame at the end. So he doesn't like kids, but he does grow to like the kids and kind of protect the kids, but not in the way you would expect with the counterfeiters around and them being armed and hiding on his bus. Superboy, instead of like taking care of these counterfeiters, lets them get away with things for a while, watching who they make deals with in different areas they go and visit. It's Clark's class, by the way, that's on the bus, if that wasn't already clear. Instead, taking down the counterfeiting ring piece by piece until he gets to like the main part by following them or allowing them to come with him. Honestly, after the first time Superboy screwed with them, maybe they shouldn't have taken this bus full of kids. But I don't think they're that smart. But you notice how none of this is interacting in an interesting way. So when you have Matt sort of liking explaining things to kids, you have it distracted by Superboy taking out the counterfeiters at the other end of the story. They distract from each other. They're not entwined. You possibly could have had him save the kids from the counterfeiters. I mean, Matt, specifically Matt Briggs. But I keep wanting to call Matt Healy, who is a different person entirely, but these don't interact. And that's the problem. If you have this character who's going to have growth, become a guy who actually likes kids at the end, even though he claims he doesn't, this should be interacting in some way. Somehow this counterfeiting plot where kids are technically in danger because there's armed men on the bus the whole time should be interacting with this, but it's not. They're just leaving the bus, going to meet with their counterfeiting rings, and Superboy taking care of them. So instead of focusing on one story, it's focusing on two stories, not really telling a complete version of it. All the counterfeiting story is just set pieces and action beats for Superboy to be doing. And honestly, makes it so much less interesting. We could have probably found more interesting ways for Superboy to, help out the kids on their trip, make it more interesting, which he does at the end after he defeats the counterfeiting ring when he takes them around the world. We finally earn that title, sort of. That could have been the whole story. And that would have involved him using his superpowers in an interesting way. It would have possibly not involved him fighting crime in any way, but it still could have been interesting, right? Instead, it's a panel of him just flying the bus around. So Around the World in 80 Minutes is not quite an accurate title by the sense that it's not what the story is truly about. It's just sort of a resolution at the end. It's like calling the last Lord of the Ring book, I'm Home. I mean, the entire story is about getting home, but it's not exactly what that story was about. It was more of the return of the king. Or several other things that could have worked for that title, but it's not the very end, right? It's not the resolution that defines the story exactly. And he becomes an actual bus driver because he grows to actually like the kids. He even has a line about how they would get into trouble without him, which would have worked better if he was more or less actually involved with protecting the kids for most of the story. See, the problem with the growth Instead, you get two separate stories. Neither one works quite as well. And honestly, it would probably have been a better title with just the counterfeiting bus driver. I don't know what to go with this title. Neither connect. But it is sort of false advertising because it's not about going around the world in 80 minutes. It's about fighting counterfeiters and a guy growing to like kids. Should have picked one and did that. Okay, that is it from Adventure Comics 138. Around the world in 80 minutes, which is probably the most I've said a title in any of these videos. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe at the bell icon to get notifications when a new video goes up. And do this Monday through Friday, but Friday is Bat Friday, where I cover Batman story and other Detective Comics or Batman. And until next time, let's ponder the question, whatever did happen to the boy of tomorrow? And it's really fascinating that you could argue this is an origin story about Clark's bus driver. Okay, have a great day.